Tell me where in the world you are watching from before we start. In the comments, include the name of your nation or town. I'm fascinated by the reach of these Wild West tailies. When Weston Harlow put down his last hand, the poker game was almost over. Thunder rumbling low behind the hills, rain slapping soft fists against the glass outside the saloon. Inside, the lanterns flickered as if they were hearing as well. He wasn't a habitual gambler. But tonight, like a string passing through his ribs, something had dragged him out of his hut and into town. Something hollow that he was unable to identify. The female in the corner was the one that unnerved him the most out of the 5 men seated around the table. All of them were heavy with whiskey breath and smoke. She was sitting rather than standing, as if someone had attempted to instill some sense of dignity in her, and she was clinging to what remained of it. Red hair that was twisted as if it were recalling better times. Once possibly green, the dress is now torn at the hem and wet from travel. A ribbon that had turned from scarlet to rust was used to tie the wrists loosely. The marshal had swirled his glass and muttered, "She ain't mine, but she's part of the pot." Irish, who speaks like a hymn yet snaps like a savage cat, nobody questioned it. Debts and alcohol frequently superseded decency in Mercy's Hollow. At his cards, Weston peered. King over 7s, complete house, and back at her. She kept her eyes on the empty glass in front of her, lips pressed firmly, chin raised. Bold in a room without turning to face him, slowly he laid the cards down. There was a calm that seemed to last forever and could break. "Well," someone murmured, "I will be." The marshal was silent for a while. He simply drained his glass and nodded before turning to face the girl. "Bridget, you are now Harlow's property." She passed past Weston, silent, barefoot, and with her ribboned wrists quivering as she rose like a summoned ghost. He simply walked out slowly and steadily, his hat pulled low, without touching her or even giving her a direct look. Under the sound of the rain, she trailed behind, her head bent. While they were riding, he remained silent. Not her? She was unsure of her course but more terrified to remain motionless, her arms soaked through and her eyes flashing like dough. He handed her the blanket off his saddle, but he made no attempt to assist her in draping it. He held her up with one big hand when she leaned too much and almost fell, but he remained silent. They arrived to his cabin, which was nestled against a hill and had smoke curling faintly from the chimney just before daybreak. A lonely, worn-out object made of determination and hefty timbers. As he ignited the stove inside, she remained on the porch. She didn't intervene or knock. He left it that way after widening the door. Only when the wind became so strong that it pricked her cheeks did Bridge enter. Her boots created tiny puddles on his floor, and her damp clothes stuck to her. With a scarcely heard voice, she declared, "I don't belong to you." Wesson kept his gaze fixed on the stove. "You didn't say you did?" He placed a stew in a tin bowl on the table. She peered at it as if it contained a horrible substance. She then slowly sat and ate without saying anything, her every move filled with suspicion. As he moved, her gaze never left him. That night, he slept in the chair. Arms about her ribs like armor, she cuddled up on the rug by the fire. She never uttered a sound even though her body shook beneath the blanket he offered her. Before the flames turned to ash, he saw the firelight flicker across her face. She was still there in the morning, quietly curled up and quiet. He gave her a coffee. She was accustomed to kindness and received it as though it would have a price. The wind had stopped outside, and the hills were softer in the early morning light. He proceeded to care for the horses. She had bare arms that were rosy from the cold and was hanging a wet dress on the porch rail when he returned. His throat was cleaned. In the back room is a coat. She nodded after hesitating. He thought about that nod all day. Though he didn't say much, he was aware of everything. How she winced when doors were slammed. How, when he sat at the table, she declined. Her fingers moved like if she had played the piano, but now they trembled with each motion. He didn't stop her when she asked to sweep the cabin. Simply gave her the broom and silently went back to cutting the fence posts. People in the town also noticed. They did it every time. People turned their heads when he took her to the supplies store. Like dust, whispers moved beneath the floors. The poker girl is that. Problem that was imported. She is going to defraud them. It's pretty. For trash, they were heard by Bridget. Her back tightened, and he could see it. Long after dinner that evening, she stood on the porch and gazed into the darkness. He was silent as snow when he stood behind her. They talk like I'm a thing, she shrugged. He answered, they talk because they're bored. She didn't respond. The shutters rattled as the wind increased. The following day he fixed them. As she scrubbed the dishes, she started humming to herself. Just a hint of a music in a different language, nothing loud. He simply listened from the barn without asking what it meant. And something that he was unaware was still there softened inside of him. She discovered a lavender sprig next to her. Plate one day, she didn't inquire if he was the source. She smiled for the first time in front of him, but he remained silent. It was short-lived. Someone threw a rock at the cabin window that evening. Silence and shattered glass ensued. Weston discovered nothing but boot prints and laughing vanishing into the trees as he hurried outside. With her hands covering her ears, she was curled up in the corner. He sat next to her without making contact or talking, just remaining there. He fixed the window the following morning. Instead of making 1 cup of coffee, she made 2. He gave her a pair of boots that she had not even dared to request. Since the saloon, she had been wearing the same ripped pair. She somehow blinked at them, then thanked him by placing a gentle hand on his arm. There was a storm that night, strong winds and rain. With a scream stuck in her throat, she awoke in the dark. His lamp was already lit when he greeted her in the corridor. He led her to the fireplace and put a blanket around her shoulders without saying anything. She grabbed his hand and held on to it. She had never intentionally touched him before. He never inquired about her origins, the meaning behind the marshal's description of her as feral. However, she spoke one evening as they were sitting by the fire. I came on a ship, she whispered. Prior to the first snowfall, my brother passed away. I scrubbed floors for a living. I was duped into signing a contract I didn't comprehend. They claimed I owed them money. After that, I was won over by Coyle from a man who owed him more. I believe he simply enjoyed the sound of possession. Weston's eyes were steady as he gazed at her. You are nothing. No, she muttered, but I had the need. They sat quietly. Why did you play? She then inquired softly. He paused. It had been 5 months since I had last spoken to anyone. My voice seemed to be lost in the home. She gave a nod. It's odd how silence can become painful. After then, they both experienced silence, but it didn't seem the same until the marshal came back. The sun was brilliant and clear shortly after midday. Bridget was standing at the washing line, her hands frozen in mid-pin when one went outside, and seen 3 horses galloping up the hill. Smug as ever, Marshall curled as he dismounted. His 2 friends appeared to be the type of individuals who enjoy making fun of brutality. He paused. Evening Creed. You mean Harlow? Weston did not answer. I suppose I'm here to gather. The girl was bluffing. Nothing is legally binding, just having a little fun, you get it? Bridget took a step toward Weston. Weston remarked in a hushed voice, she's not going with you. Don't be fooled, I own her. Marshal, you trade cattle, not people? Coyle's eyes narrowed. You don't remember who enforces the law in this community. Weston stepped up and added, I didn't forget. I lost interest. Marshall's hand went to his sidearm. Weston remained motionless without flinching. Bridge walked next to him, chin up. She stays, replied Weston, and Bridge responded on his behalf if I said otherwise. I'll scream when you have to drag me. Coyle froze and turned his gaze from her to Weston, mentally weighed something. After spitting, he turned and rode away. Bridget turned to Weston, gasping for air as the dust had cleared. That was not necessary for you to accomplish. Yes, I did. Everything could have been lost for you. He looked her in the eye. Not all of it. She moved in close. I didn't win a game with you? No, but I found you there, he responded. When he first touched her face, she gave him a shaky, broad smile that resembled spring breaking through ice. She washed her clothes in the creek the following morning while barefoot in the grass. He whispered, testing the sound behind her, Bridget Harlow. She pivoted. You didn't inquire. Now I'm asking. She nodded after letting out a short, harsh laugh. He took a tiny band out of his pocket, twisted it out of the wire, and pounded it into a circle. With trembling hands, she slipped the ring, not for show, but for staying onto her own finger. She said, I'm not owned. He said, You never were. And with that, they walked back up the hill, two people who hadn't been looking for love, but had found something steadier. The fiercest wines are sometimes created by what a guy refuses to fold on, not at the table. Please leave a comment for Bridget or Weston or for the kind of quiet STR.